huge hanging chandelier glittered. Sunlight streamed through silk curtains. 7 figures stirred. Each one lay in a plush, king-sized bed. Confusion clouded their minds. Where were they? How did they get here? A sense of unease settled upon them. This wasn't familiar. This wasn't right. The air hung heavy with an unknown threat. A woman in a crimson dress sat up. She clutched her head. Her name was Isabella. A businessman in a tailored suit, Arthur, looked around bewildered. A young woman, Emily, with vibrant pink hair, trembled. A gruff older man, John, cursed under his breath. A timid librarian, Eleanor, adjusted her glasses nervously. A renowned chef, Marco, sniffed the air suspiciously. And finally, Daniel, a writer, sat up with a gasp, clutching a small, leather-bound notebook. Panic began to rise. They called out to one another. No one seemed to know how they arrived. The room was lavish, yet strangely silent. A grand fireplace dominated one wall. A mahogany desk stood across the room untouched. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. They rose from their beds, their movements hesitant. The luxurious surroundings offered little comfort. Something felt amiss. The beauty of the room felt like a facade, a thin veil over something sinister. They were trapped in a gilded cage. The sense of dread deepened with every passing moment. They discovered the doors were locked. Heavy oak doors unyielding to their efforts. Panic turned to fear. They rattled the handles. They banged on the doors. Their cries for help went unanswered. The silence of the mansion was deafening. The walls seemed to close in around them. Each room held a different kind of terror. Isabella's room had a venomous snake hidden in a vase. Arthur's room had a gas leak slowly filling the space. Emily's room had a floor that threatened to collapse into a pit of spikes. John's room had a seemingly harmless painting that concealed a sharp blade. Eleanor's room had a bookshelf rigged to fall. Marco's room had a poisoned decanter of wine. They narrowly avoided the traps. One by one, they discovered the dangers lurking within their luxurious prisons. The elaborate decor of the mansion turned into a mocking reminder of their predicament. Every beautiful object seemed to hide a potential threat. The once comforting luxury now felt like a sinister joke. The initial confusion morphed into sheer terror. They were not just trapped, they were being hunted. An unseen presence loomed over them. Someone was watching. Someone was playing a game with their lives. The stakes were higher than they could have imagined. Each breath they took felt like a borrowed moment. In each room they found cryptic notes, small handwritten messages on parchment paper, signed only, the architect. The notes were riddles, puzzles, hints perhaps to their escape, or perhaps another layer of the torment. The words danced before their eyes, mocking their desperation. Your past sins will unlock your future, one note read. Another, the key to survival lies in your shared history. The messages were vague, ominous. They spoke of guilt and retribution. The strangers began to eye each other with suspicion. What secrets did they hold? What shared past connected them? The mansion itself seemed to hold its breath. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed through the silent halls. The weight of the unknown pressed down on them. The air grew thick with fear and suspicion. The luxurious prison was becoming a psychological torture chamber. The notes from the architect were not just clues. They were psychological weapons. They sowed discord among the strangers. They forced them to confront their pasts, their secrets, their regrets. The game was not just about physical survival. It was about mental and emotional breakdown. The architect was playing with their minds as much as their lives. Section 4. The Architect's Game. Daniel, the writer, made a chilling discovery. His small leather-bound notebook contained not his own writing, but detailed profiles of each stranger in the mansion. Their names, their occupations, their deepest secrets, their darkest fears. He realized the terrible truth. They were not random strangers. They were chosen, selected for a reason. This wasn't just a series of unfortunate events. This was a carefully orchestrated plan, a psychological experiment designed to push them to their limits. The architect was not just a captor, they were a puppet master, pulling the strings of their lives. The mansion was not a prison, it was a stage. He shared his discovery with the others. Their initial reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage. How could someone know so much about them? What had they done to deserve this? The seeds of paranoia planted by the architect began to sprout. They looked at each other with distrust, suspicion hardening their gazes. The realization that they were part of a larger game, a twisted experiment, shifted the dynamics. The focus was no longer just on escape. It was about understanding the motives of the architect. Who was this mastermind, and what did they want from them? The questions hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. Section 5. Unveiling the past. As they delved deeper into the riddles in the rooms, fragments of their shared past began to surface. A business deal gone wrong, a betrayal of trust, a moment of carelessness with devastating consequences. The strangers were connected by a single thread. They had all, in some way, wronged someone connected to the architect. Isabella's fraudulent dealings had ruined a family. Arthur's ruthless ambition had cost lives. Emily's reckless driving had resulted in a tragic accident. John's negligence had led to a devastating fire. Eleanor's silence had protected a criminal. Marco's culinary ambition had led to food poisoning. And Daniel's words had destroyed reputations. The architect's motive started to become clear. This wasn't just a game, it was an act of revenge. A meticulously planned retribution for past transgressions. The mansion was not just a prison, it was a courtroom. And the architect was the judge, jury, and executioner. The weight of their past sins pressed down on them. The luxurious surroundings mocked their guilt. The cryptic notes became accusations. They were trapped not only by the locked doors and deadly traps, but also by the weight of their own consciences. The architect had forced them to confront their pasts, and the truth was more terrifying than any physical threat. Section 6. A twisted connection. The final note revealed the mastermind's identity. It was someone they all knew, someone they had all wronged, someone whose life they had irrevocably altered. The architect was not a faceless entity. They were a victim seeking retribution. The game was not random, it was deeply personal. Daniel, looking at the faces of the other captives, saw the realization dawning on them. The fear, the guilt, the understanding. They were all complicit in the architect's pain. They had all played a part in this twisted game of revenge. The mansion was not just a stage. It was a mirror reflecting their own culpability. The architect manipulated events from the shadows, pitting the strangers against each other, exploiting their fears and weaknesses. The traps were not just physical dangers, they were psychological tests, designed to break them down, to expose their true natures. The game was about survival, yes, but it was also about atonement. As the walls of the mansion seemed to close in, Daniel understood. The architect's true objective wasn't just revenge. It was to force them to confront the consequences of their actions, to make them understand the pain they had caused. The locked rooms, the deadly traps, the cryptic notes, they were all part of a grand, horrifying morality play, and they were all playing their assigned roles.